Pardon?
She had her surgery yesterday.
Yeah. Call the Finance Committee to order. Alderman Payon and Alderman Arnett are here, and let's have a quick thought for Alderwoman Finlayson, who is recovering from knee surgery today and probably isn't missing being here one bit. Oh, come on. At this time, I would accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. By the way, I
Second.
spoke with Alderwoman Finlayson very briefly last evening, and she seemed to be in good spirits, and
That's because she was on all that good medicine.
she was going to spend the night last night and get out today, so things went
Good.
well.
All right, well, I'm glad to hear that. All right, so the minute has been moved and seconded. All in favor of the agenda. All in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Approval of the minutes. I would accept a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. First item on the agenda is supplemental appropriations, starting with SA 2420, Planning and Zoning, an appropriation of $19,000. I assume this is recognition of a grant that we didn't have in the budget.
Correct. This is a supplemental allocation of $19,000. We're getting money from the Maryland Department of Planning. It was not included in the FY20 budget, and we're going to use it to help pay the costs associated with the 2020 census. And I see Planning and Zoning as staff here if you have any questions.
I think this is straightforward unless you have questions.
I have no questions.
I would accept a motion to recommend approval.
I would move that we approve.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. So, moving on now to SA 2520, City Operating Grant Revenue. This is police. Again, this looks pretty straightforward to me, the acceptance of revenues that had not been included in the budget, is that correct?
Correct. For $25,000.
I'm going to go through these quickly unless somebody wants to give us information that we need to know, but, so we'd be happy to hear from you as always, but are there any questions, Alderman Payne?
No, none.
Thank you, good job. Keep it rolling, keep it coming in. Right, thank you.
Always happy to accept money without having to match.
All right, is there a motion to approve SA 25-20?
I would move that we approve the SA.
Second?
2520.
Second, any further discussion? All
No.
in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Moving on to SA 26, which is for OEM, our ever resourceful grant getters in OEM. Is there something we need to know about this in particular?
No, it's additional money pursued and received at the last minute that other jurisdictions were unable to spend.
And we always can.
We can always spend other jurisdictions' money, so they approved $9,199 for a tank truck emergency response workshop for the fire hazmat team.
All right.
For how many people is that?
It accommodates 25 to 30 people, so we are going to fill the room with as many of our folks as we can and then open up invitations to fire departments around the region. There is I should mention, there is a match. It is a soft match. We're going to use the departmental salaries of the folks attending. There is a possibility, depending on the amount of folks that we get, that we may have to dip into some of the appropriated funds from the fire department, but they're aware of that, and it shouldn't be much, if anything.
And you couldn't get the extra dollar to make it an even 9,200?
They follow their formulas.
Are there any questions?
No.
I accept a motion to approve
So moved.
SA 2620. Second, All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Well, I see we expended quite a bit of, okay, now we have some legislation. I was going to say, we expended quite a bit of staff time for quick actions. Legislation before the committee, the position classifications amendment, R7-20. We have people from HR. Again, I think this is fairly self-explanatory. It's a correction.
This is,
Why won't I?
this is going to approve a position reclassification. I'll ask Tricia Hopkins to come up.
Okay.
And then Brian Snyder's here from purchasing too, because he's kind of started the ball rolling on this and upgrading one of his positions that's been vacant for a while. We want to make it a higher level position so we can try to train somebody to take over the purchasing officer position.
Apparently the staff report's unavailable, at least on mine it is.
We have already been through our required process of the Civil Service Board. So the job description has been through the Civil Service Board, and I've done the requisite work to look at it, the compensation level, and make a recommendation to the Civil Service Board, which you should have the notes of that, the minutes of that meeting to show that we did in fact complete that part of the process.
What is the fiscal impact?
I have not done a fiscal impact note on this. How many grades up did it go? Is it two?
It's the senior buyer previously was a grade 10. The recommendation is for it to be a grade 13. The job duties are significantly changed.
Right.
Because this individual is now, I mean, we kept the title, but we didn't keep intact the responsibility levels because, again, we're kind of three-tiering that organization now. And as Jody described, for succession planning, but also because the work warrants that you have kind of a
tiered
tiered
staffing system there.
to really fill in for the purchasing agent in some higher level bidding processes and so on.
And do we have a staff person on board that would qualify for this job?
No.
We will do what's required of us in terms of internal announcing, but more than likely because of the certification requirements and the work requirements, it's going to necessitate that we do a wider recruitment effort.
What's the approximate difference in the pay level between an A10 and an A13?
Well, there's 7.5% between grades.
I'm sorry?
7.5% between grades, and so you're looking at a 3-grade change.
21%?
22%.
Yeah, about a 20.
Like I said, I haven't done the analysis yet, and I don't have my computer with me today, so.
But again, from a financial standpoint, this year, they have been carrying a vacancy the entire
Yeah.
year to date. And so it's not a matter of being unable to fund a recruitment that we would launch into now. By the time that position gets filled, we're looking at, a few months from now.
And Mr. Snyder's here. Do we, I assume we can substantiate that there's a workload that requires this additional person and this higher grade?
Yes, I'm looking to have somebody that can back me up. Currently, we've been out, the buyer position has been vacant since May 1st when Phyllis Mahoney retired.
Right.
So we'll be probably just about a year, assuming this gets approved, before replacing that position.
Okay. And Mr. City Manager, this is consistent with your overall plans in the budget?
Well, it certainly will be, yeah. I mean, we've recognized the situation for a long time, that they're 3 deep over there and that they need some redundancy for when Brian's out. So, yeah, we're very supportive of this.
Alderman Payon, any other questions or observations?
Well, what is the pay level? I don't know what an A10 makes.
Can you give the pay ranges for the current grade and then
The current grade is an A9. It starts at 44,424, and the individual retired at 74,888. So she was at the maximum of the pay scale. And then your A13 begins at 59,327 and maxes out at 100. 011. Of course, that's
Yeah.
after longevity,
Right.
so that person would have to have 20 years longevity
Right.
before they got there. So
So
you're
you-
really looking at a max rate, well, it depends on the
Somewhere
hiring rate,
between
but-
15,000 and 25,000, based on the upper and lower levels. Those are the differences, and then you'd have to consider FICA and retirement costs on top of that.
Yeah.
Right.
So that would be the maximum exposure. We won't know where we'd hire somebody in the range until we see who our candidates are.
Right.
Well, why is this 3 grades higher? Why isn't it 1 or 2? I mean, it seems,
Well, the duties, the senior buyer was 1 grade higher than the buyer. The senior buyer was really just somebody with more experience at the buyer level. And they did not have any senior buyers among their staff. They had 2 buyers at the grade 9 rather. And so the evaluation looked at some comparators in surrounding jurisdiction in terms of their organizational structure relative to their highest level purchasing individual. And because this person is performing at a much more robust level of responsibility, because they're not just handling duties the same as the buyer, they are in fact going to fill in for the purchasing agent on many occasions. That the grade 13 was an appropriate grade, both considering external data and then looking internally at how that stacks up with other positions in the city.
So I would note that a lot of this, I would have hoped could have been in the minutes from the Civil Service Board. They're not helpful in understanding the nature of the work and,
Well, we gave
How
you the
we-
job description, though, as part of that.
well, yeah, but that doesn't help in terms of justifying, as Alderman Payon says, and this is a permanent jump to the 13 level. Now, my between the lines understanding is we're not likely to get anybody at a lower pay level. Is that correct? That if we
won't really know
advertise it
until
as at 11 or
until we
12?
start recruiting. We won't really know until we start recruiting. And that's the case regardless of the position. You don't know what the market's going to bring you. You don't know if the talent there is
Correct, and
available
we
to
were
you.
hoping we get somebody with the certification that we need. The idea is that we have the purchasing agent and then 2 lower-level buyers that do a lot of the daily work, but Brian is the only one that we have to develop RFPs, to attend meetings with bidders, and those decisions. And so we need to have some kind of mid-level position there that could fill in when necessary, and then possibly be able to step up.
But this
for
is
succession.
why I have long thought we should have career ladders. So if you go just down the list here a little bit, you can see a county associate 1, a county associate 2, a county associate 3. We're changing this permanently from a 10 to a 13, rather than establishing a range of 10 to 13, and then we could hire in there. So we could be able to hire an 11 or a 12, and they would have headroom to go to a 13, but
Unfortunately, Alderman, our career ladders aren't really designed that way within the city. It's not like you could say, I'm going to give 3 grades to this
Right.
title.
I know they're
this
not
is-
designed
Yeah,
that
we
way,
don't-
but
we
that's what I'm
don't have
saying.
those
It
Yeah,
should be
it-
designed that way.
We're kind of stuck with 1 grade, 1 title. And, until we get into some other kind of job creation here, and I've done this at the county where we created something we called a proficiency series, so that when somebody got through the entry level, became a journey level, and even in the professions, somebody that really masters their work,
Right.
that you allow that individual to kind of move standing still through those changes. We're not designed that way. We're not set up that way. We simply evaluated the need as it was presented here to determine what's an appropriate way to structure the purchasing division.
But because we're not designed that way, and I'm arguing
Yeah.
that we should be, I think it could be appropriate for the Finance Committee to say, go back out and advertise for an 11. If you don't have results, go back and advertise for a 12 If you don't have results, then go back out and advertise for a 13, which would be the fiscally responsible way of doing it. My argument is it's also hugely time-consuming. If there's a level of work that can't be addressed, it would seem to me that having a career ladder where you could advertise for a person at whatever level they qualify, if they're a satisfactory candidate, and you have the headroom, but we're now making a permanent change from a 10 level to a 13 level, which $100,000, granted at the end of the year, is a heck of a lot of money. I mean, that's not, and then when you add to it all of the benefits and retirement and all of that sort of stuff, it is not cheap, and that needs to be balanced, it seems to me, against all other staff requirements. I don't want to drag Brian's particular action into this larger venue, but I would ask you and the city manager, I think it is time to start thinking about establishing the career ladders. We cast a broader net, and we could find we have a multitude of candidates, and in fact, that the person who qualifies at an 11 vis-a-vis a career ladder set of KSAs and responsibilities would be just fine for the job, and let them grow into a 13. And hopefully with that there as an incentive, they will stay and grow into that. But now, this is kind of a take it or leave it, make this big jump or don't. And if we had career ladders, we wouldn't be faced with that kind of a choice.
I'm sorry you see it as kind of a take it or leave it, because the effort that went into determining the grade is really based on survey
Skills
information, comparisons of job descriptions with other jurisdictions, is also assessing what the internal need is. It's really not it's not a frivolous assignment of a grade. It's really a bit more involved than that. And of course, I take my charge
Yes.
really seriously
No,
under the
I know you
code.
do, and I don't
Yeah.
mean to imply that, but
Yeah.
it is a take it or leave it. It is, we're asking to permanently change this to a much higher level with a much higher top end and a much bigger, longer consequence after retirement to the city. And we saw in the documentation here nothing about that work that you did, which I'm sure you did, and I know your work and I respect it, but you're asking us really to make a decision on faith. We can do that, and we most always do, but that's really not what we should be doing, and particularly not this committee on these kinds of issues. We're here to ask those more penetrating questions and to get a better understanding. I really find it hard to believe that if we change this to a 12 instead of a 13, that we know we won't get qualified applicants.
Brian,
maybe
did we run this ad at the current level when it was
Yes.
first vacated?
We did.
What happened? Didn't get anybody that had the potential to even step into a higher role, correct?
We had like 50 applications, and I didn't see anybody that would fit the need that I have.
Okay. I also wanted to add, your point is correct, that over time, this is a higher pay grade. The person that left last May was making $75,000 a year. All right, this starts at the $60,000 range.
Right.
And the likelihood of going all the way to the top of that range would
Well, and
be,
we're talking about, I've included longevity steps in telling you what the maximum pay
Right.
is. You don't receive that $100,000 until you have 20
so
years of experience.
so that impact that you're talking about,
Yeah.
we likely wouldn't see till later. And then Brian is hoping to retire at some point in time in the future, and then we
believe me.
could possibly have somebody, if they're qualified, to step up.
And I believe in continuity planning.
Yeah.
I understand all of that. But we are the ones that are supposed to get into the details to recommend to our colleagues on the council. Now, they can always, at the date of the meeting, go through the same exercise, ask these same questions all over again, and we can just obviate having to come to the Finance Committee and have all of this in the middle of a council meeting, I don't think that's what we want. I don't think that's what we're designed for. I do not want to let go of this discussion of creating career ladders. I think that it is, my experience in having them in the federal government is, it's a very valuable way to do things. And it's also very valuable when I would have my performance appraisals with staff, and they would say, when can I expect a promotion? And I would say, well, let's look at your KSAs and your level of responsibility. For you to get a promotion, here's the next level of responsibility, usually in terms of independent operation and so forth. And tell me the kinds of things you think you're ready to do at this next higher level, and then we can talk about when and how you get a promotion. Now, usually they make very good arguments, and they usually won those arguments with me, but we don't have that kind of a system here. And so I think we're getting kind of moribund, and we just make these big jumps without any documentation. I don't doubt that it happened, Trish, but there's no documentation here. But I see Director Gerald had his hands raised, maybe just to stop me with my tirade.
You're still used to the Director General. After 9 years, I understand that. So we're supportive of the career ladder concept. What we're looking at right now is the job descriptions where we have several employees in that, such as engineers, such as planners, such as inspectors. Right. So those are the ones that we want to transition to a career ladder, because it makes sense that as they come in at a lower level, and then they have the opportunity to progress through that. So we've had meetings in the short time that I've been the city manager
and
to talk about that already, because we do think that that's worthwhile. For these one-off positions, maybe we'll move into that area, but we're really interested in the bigger groupings of employees and positions to look at that.
Thank you for that, but I don't accept that they have to be or should be one-off positions. I'm certainly happy to entertain that. Years ago, long before any of you were here, we had our 5219, which was to go back through all of the HR classification stuff. Alderwoman Hoyle and I worked on that, and it got into a lot of these issues. It was a very thick document. It died of its own weight. Towards the latter part of Paul Rensted's career, we reopened that and looked at it, and both times I had made the argument that we really need to move to a different classification system, one with more career ladders, one with more explicit gradation about KSA requirements and level of responsibility and those sorts of things. And every time the legislation basically fell of its own weight and timed out at the end of the term, I do think that we need to get back into that. I think that that's something that makes things much better operationally. I think it really improves. I felt that it improved my relationship with the people that I was supervising, because I could talk about concrete things. We could go over their background. We could go over their accomplishments. In fact, I would have my staff write their performance appraisal. I didn't write their performance appraisal. I had them write it, and then we would talk about it, and we would evaluate what do you need to do to get promoted. I always found them to be much tougher on themselves than I was, and I appreciate it because it gave me the opportunity to say, you forgot you did a good job on this. Oh, yeah, that kind of thing. But it encourages that dialogue, but it gives you a context for that dialogue. And I feel and I know we do have KSAs and levels of responsibility, but we don't have it in a career ladder. So again, I don't want to belabor that. Where do you want to go with this, Alderman Payon?
Well, I am not prepared to support this at an A13 grade. I think that perhaps we ought to, at this point, the short-term answer is look at reevaluating the grade and bring it back. I agree with you that bring it bringing it to the council as a whole right now would, I think, would elicit a strong debate, and frankly, I think we'd end up wasting a lot of time for a bill, an ordinance that, or excuse me, a transfer that may in fact not pass the muster when it comes before the council.
So, can I interject? So I hope I've clarified that that department needs a tiered staffing system. Right now, we have a director, not a director position, but the purchasing agent and 2 lower-level buyers. We need to tier it. When we define what we wanted the duties to be of that second tier and evaluated it in accordance with their duties and comparable salaries of the like people at other jurisdictions, we came up with a 13. I'm not sure why we would then go back and reevaluate and come up with a 12 when we'd have to peel back duties and not have them at the level we need them to hopefully someday work their way into a leadership position there. I mean, I don't know what the possibilities are for 12, 11, 10.
Neither do we. But that's, first of all, we don't have any documentation of those deliberations. I have no doubt that they occurred, but we don't see anything in here that tells us that you did that kind of evaluation. And in fact, I think what I've heard said is you don't really know whether there's somebody out there that is qualified at a 12 that could do this job, or an 11. So,
But in all due respect, that is not how you determine the compensation level of positions. You don't do it on the basis of what the labor pool is. That may tell you that when you have gone out and recruited, as has been done at the buyer level already, that we ran into great difficulty attracting somebody that had credentials that could even be mature enough in their career and their experience and knowledge and their educational background to one day assume the responsibilities that exist today, the need exists today. And so it's real. That's the market is part of it. The market's always delayed in what it responds to in terms of making compensation changes when there are real recruitment and the greater challenge we have, as baby boomers retire in droves now, is being able to replace the talent that has gotten to the place where an individual could step into a more senior position. So we're never going to be ahead of that curve, and respectively be able to make adjustments internally, but we have done the best that we can in assessing what is already existing in other jurisdictions, and also looking internally, because the internal comparisons you want to do as well. You're talking about a recommendation that's equivalent to an accountant, not a senior accountant, an accountant level position, a planner level position, not a senior planner, a planner level position. And so it's really not a high level recommendation for a grade assignment that honestly, I think it's a modest request when looking at all of the data comparisons that went into this.
Well, we're being asked to make a substantial increase in pay and expenditures for the taxpayers here, and we don't really have a fiscal impact statement. We don't have a substantial staff report, although I have to say, under normal circumstances, this is just fine. But this is a substantial increase that we're looking for. We don't even have the notes from the Civil Service Board. Well, maybe we do have the notes, but they're not sufficient. They don't tell us anything. Again, like Alderman Arnett said, our chairman, we're basically asked to fly blind on this, and I'm not willing to do that. Now, we can take a vote, and I guess it goes on to the council no matter what we do, but...
well, first we have to have a motion before we do a vote.
Yeah, well, true.
I guess I'm not sure then what our next, if it doesn't go through and it doesn't get your approval and the council doesn't approve, what's the next mover? I have to try to grade it at a level 10, no, it was a 10, so 11, and then try to run it and see if we get anybody, and then grade it at a 12 and run it and see if we get anybody.
Just contrary to,
I'm not asking for that for this. I'm asking in the broader context that we need to start thinking about establishing those career ladders so that we do have more.
Well, I don't disagree with
But what
those
we do not
points.
have is the things that we've heard to some extent here verbally, that this position, tell me if I got it correct, has been reevaluated, and in fact, for the expectations for filling this position, it justifies a level 13, not a level 10. That there's a body of work that is at the 13 level per your collective assessment. So, and it doesn't have to be elaborate, but I think it does need to be something, I won't speak for Alderman Prion, but I would like to say be something that I can point to my colleagues and say, here was the justification for
Okay.
it, seemed reasonable to us to the extent of our abilities to
Okay.
understand. Now, I do have some experience in personnel. I
Right.
was actually quite good at it in the
I
federal
believe that.
government.
So would you like us, is there a potential to delay the decision on this? And is there an option to delay the decision on this and then come back at the next meeting with that information and provide it to you? So,
I'm amenable to that. I think that's, and since it's been empty since May, I don't.
yeah, I mean, we're a year without a position there, and it's really getting,
All
it's
right.
getting difficult.
The buyers that you have there now are what level?
One, the buyer,
But, well, I know,
grade 9.
9 and 10. The other one was a 10.
Well, the senior buyer is not, there's no allocation for a senior buyer. The senior buyer title and grade assignment of 10 existed from a prior time. It's in the position summary.
I think we
and that's
can-
why you see it in here with a grade adjustment, because that's what we needed to go back and.
I think we can agree that a senior buyer who has more responsibilities than the buyers you have there now clearly would deserve to be at a pay rate higher than what the two colleagues, his or her two colleagues would be making.
But
I
what you
understand
also,
that.
in all due respect, what you also have is a job description that is substantially different from what the senior buyer was prior to.
But
And
we
if we
don't
need
know
to
that.
provide you the old description so you can make that comparison to see that the duties assigned to the senior buyer title
Yes.
are not equivalent to the duties previously assigned to the senior buyer title, even though there's no allocation right now. There was an existing job description.
So that's the 1-2 step. One
Yeah.
is, this is basically a new position, so we need to know that what it constitutes in this new position, and we do need to understand what is the justification. Why are we, and one of them you've already given, which is succession planning.
Correct.
And I think that's
Which is
find that to
also
be a
in the
very
staff
strong
report.
argument. Pardon?
It's also in the staff report identified as that, I
I
believe.
missed it. I mean,
Well, I prepared a staff report.
this,
Not-
it's in this? I think we're indicating that that's not sufficient for us. It doesn't tell us, it doesn't do the, what we had and what we want to move to, doesn't do the rationale for that. I see no
So-
mention of succession planning in here, those sorts of things.
So what you'd like to see is the duties under the old, the duties under what we're proposing, so that you can evaluate the decision that the Civil Service Commission made in deciding whether to upgrade
Or
it.
conversely, an argument that this is essentially a new position. We're taking a slot that we had, although we don't have slots in the city. We're taking a position we had and we're changing it to a new function. And this is what those new functions are. And this is why we feel we need to do it. And again, as I said, succession planning is certainly a strong
That's a
argument
piece of it.
about it. But also, what does the senior buyer do that the buyers can't do or don't do, or shouldn't be expected to do. But just a little more substance.
Okay. Next, so we can line that up for the next finance committee meeting and bring that to you and see.
Yeah.
And we can even, if you want to get it ahead of time, we'll send it to you and we
We
can,
always want to get it ahead of time.
yeah. Answer any questions or outstanding items questions that you have or concerns that you have.
So do you have a motion to postpone?
Reset. Yes, I would
I
move
second
to
that.
reset this. What is our,
We meet every other week, so we'll be
March the
meeting-
what?
for it. We'll be meeting soon,
Want to do
again.
it for March 4th or March 18th?
I think if we can, will you be able to do it by the 4th? Yeah, okay.
March
Yeah,
4th.
March 4th, all right. I second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. All right, that was a little more discussion than I was anticipating. Sorry, we're not trying to delay or be obstructionist, but we are trying to do our job as we see it and to help get this to our colleagues so that
Well-
we're basically here to convince them that we've looked at this in detail and we think it's okay.
Well, and I'm also respectfully trying to understand the steps that are my responsibility under the code, which is maintaining a pay plan, the classification plan, taking that before the Civil Service Board for the interaction with them to make that to them, and then also bring it back for council approval.
So
I'm
that's
just
a
trying
very
to-
fair question.
Yeah, I'm
And I
just trying to
think-
understand to what
and I think
extent
we've
the
been-
depth of that information is necessary to
We've
carry
been
things through
groping
all
with that
channels.
over the years. I think that, for me, I'll put it very simply. You want to make a change in a classification, it comes with a price tag. And what I would expect with your expertise and your druthers is that you would make the argument as to why we should do that. Why we need it, why we should do it. I would expect City Manager Gerald to say that things like the budget can accommodate this. This is not a big hit, or whatever Manager Gerald wants to say. But those are the kinds of things that, if we're doing our job properly, and we haven't always done that, I agree, that we would get, and so we can report to our colleagues when this resolution comes up for deliberation. We dragged them over the coals and every which way from Sunday, and they gave us very strong arguments, and we're convinced that you should vote for this. Be exaggerating a little bit in an attempt at humor, but apparently not. But I think
Keep
that's
trying.
Yeah, that's what we want. What we need. That's how we see carrying out our job, is getting that behind the scenes detail that I think for all the committees we're expected to do. We'll be meeting with Environmental Matters at 3 today, and that's our job, is to explain to the rest of the council why we think we need bag legislation and get into the details. And we'll be talking to Jackie Giles and getting her to provide that. So we have a motion that has been seconded to postpone deliberations on this until the next Finance Committee meeting on the 4th of March. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is R8-20, waiver of fees for the Pride of Baltimore during the months of March and April. So there could be more than one visit of the Pride during that. And the staff report, unknown error.
Yeah, I got the same thing again.
So you don't have the,
What's up with this time?
I pulled it up at home. All right. The general context for me is that it's the policy of this administration, and I think many on the council, that we want to encourage visits of tall ships to our city dock as a part of the maritime heritage of the city, as a part of attracting visitors for the sake of seeing the Pride and other tall ships. This is specific to the Pride. But also because it has positive impacts on generating business, building the zeitgeist, if you will, for the city of Annapolis is unique. The Pride has come to us and indicated with their new leadership that they also want to come to the city often. But they are a nonprofit organization. This year, I learned, is the first year that they ever have had a budget in the red, and not by much, but they really are dependent upon waiver of fees. Now, I usually take a stance against waiving fees. I'm well known for that. I feel that there is an argument to do that in this instance, and in fact, I know that the mayor has in mind a program to invite many more tall ships to the city and have something that's been dubbed by Mr. Callahan as an uprigging day, where tall ships will visit en masse to the city and go through a ceremony of uprigging, just like the one in Chestertown where they have a ceremony of downrigging. And I went to that ceremony last year. It was quite impressive. It draws huge crowds to Chestertown, and everybody has a lot of fun, but it's also good for business, and it's good for the branding of Germantown. So we have now the staff report. There's several different dates that they have here as visit dates. They themselves are waiving their fees to go on the Pride, so there's a little bit of quid pro quo here. The specific dates that they have are March 29th through 31st, and the amount of money is over $5,000.
The staff report, I don't know if you were able to open it, but has several dates listed on it. There's the initial dates in March, but there's other dates in the staff report with amounts through April. And the earlier total that Beth Bellis had provided me was $9,900 total for all of these dates, for all of these
99.
events. Yeah, if you look through the staff report, they're listed with amounts, but there's no grand total, and I have not prepared the fiscal impact note, which, if her total is correct, would be the $9,900.
So I guess before us in the Finance Committee is, is the benefit from having the Pride here all of these times, does that outweigh the amount of fees that we're waiving in total? I'd only looked at the $5,000 number. I didn't see the total number.
Yeah, there's some other visits late March and into April.
I can tell you that the mayor and I had a meeting with the Pride, and I was impressed with the Pride's enthusiasm for this program. There, I guess not in here, is the question of how much fees are we foregoing by allocating this space to the Pride. These are early in the month, in the year, so they're colder months where we don't tend to have as many visitors. But I would hasten to add that in the mayor's notion, which I share with him, this is the tip of an iceberg. This is a plan to not only do the Pride, but Sultana, Lynx, a whole host of other tall ships, maybe not with as many visits as the Pride would make, but certainly would require more dock space and would require the waiver of fees. Every one of these other tall ships are some form of nonprofit and have as a mission educating the public. First of all, they're glorious to see. The one from Sweden is incredibly well decorated, lots of paint, lots of carvings on it. I mean, they're works of art. And we know from our experience with the Hermione a few years ago, which was not well advertised and yet brought in many, many thousands of people in an extremely hot circumstances. It was so hot that Office of Emergency Management had to run out and get bottled water because people were feeling the impact. And we had a joint ceremony with St. John's over at the statues commemorating the French who helped us in the Revolutionary War. And it turned into a big deal, and it was so much fun to have been a participant in that. And that's something that stays with people that come to Annapolis, and they go back with a feeling, I got to come back again. I've got to bring my children the next time, or invite other family or friends, which I think just builds on the brand of the city of Annapolis. So I think what we're being asked to do is to balance in our recommendation on this, whether a waiver of $10,000, which is a lot of money, is worth the non-monetary rewards to the city. I don't know why I keep saying that I want to be a co-sponsor of this. I'm kind of glad I'm not now because I'm on the finance committee, so I don't have a conflict of interest, but I obviously, from my comments, strongly favor doing this. I think it is part of the branding of the city, part of the expectation of the city, part of what makes Annapolis so great.
I totally agree with you. I'm not goofing off here with my phone. I actually was looking for pictures I had when the Hermione was here.
That was so great.
And it was fantastic. A lot of fun for the young and old alike. I think whatever we spend in that regard is money well spent. It's history. It's living history. And it's just enjoyable. And I think it's a great idea, and I'm enthusiastically support waiving the fees as much as we can.
There is another side to the coin, which I must ask the city manager or the finance director, and that is these are fees that ordinarily would come to the city. I'm not exactly sure how we handle the dock fees. Do they just go into the general fund, or are they a lockbox to support the?
No, they're just one of our miscellaneous general fund revenues.
Right. So this
They help support Rec and Parks, Harbor Master activities, and all other activities.
So this isn't taking expected operating funds away from the harbor master per se.
Not per se, no. It's just that when you reduce our revenue intake by whatever amount, let's hope there's some other revenue source that makes up for that, that's over what we're expecting, because all of our spending, total spending dollars, is based on what we expect to take in revenues.
Right.
So any reduction of revenues could theoretically impact that, although this is a smaller amount.
That leads to a very complicated indirect calculation. I think many have argued that it does bring us indirect new revenues in that it increases the value of business properties downtown, and eventually we see that in their assessments and so forth. But that is such a convoluted, I do think we have the ability to put together a model that would allow us to make some inferences about that, but there could well be more than compensating amounts of revenue from other sources because of what this brings to the city, but I don't know that anyone
But,
can
look,
quantify that.
our constituents just plain want this kind of thing to happen. And
We're supposed to listen to them?
very much so.
So there's no other revenue. I mean, sales tax, we don't get a sales tax for the people that would come down here for the day. It would be a very indirect impact in what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. So, is there, are you ready to make a motion?
I am. I move that we vote in favor of R820, waiving the fees. It's a substantial amount of money, but I think it's money
We've
well
waived
spent.
more than that before. So the motion is to recommend favorably to the council to support, in support of R 8-20.
Okay? I mean,
We can't approve it, we have to recommend it.
yes, that's right. We recommend it.
I second that. Any further discussion?
None for me.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I know in discussing this with Alderwoman Finlayson that she also is favorable for that, towards that, so I don't think we're violating her in absentia. All right, next on the agenda is general discussion. First being some reports from me. I will only be able to give, I intended to give you a written report on the two meetings that I attended for the Financial Advisory Commission, one on the 12th of December and one on the 13th of February, but I must confess that I procrastinated and then ran into extreme difficulty in getting my notes from my iPad to my computer to put into Word so that I could give you that report. I do want, and I will do that, and I'll do it for our next meeting, but I did want to talk about one thing specifically that was at the last meeting that I found very important, and I'll give you a copy, I'll get you a copy, Takia, but this is discussion at the Financial Advisory Commission about adopting a spending affordability function. And they've only had preliminary discussions of that, and they gave us a thick amount of documentation, and they will be taking this up in earnest at their next Financial Advisory Commission meeting, which I would commend to anybody. Those are really very good meetings, and they really have done great service for the city over the years of their existence. But I think that this is something that is putting yet another tool in our toolbox to understand, how much we can afford to spend. Is basically what it is, and it's a modeling effort. The county does it, the state does it, other jurisdictions do it. It may well be the case that we can piggyback on the county. There's a group of companies that the county has under contract, and they may be somebody that we can partner with, and it would make sense to me to partner with the county because we're in the same economic basket. Slightly different sources of revenue. They're not as dependent on property tax as we are, but in any event. So I will get these two reports completed after I figure out how to get it into my Word document, and then give you the full context. And I will say, as I said just a minute ago, the Financial Advisory Commission takes up not only important, but really very interesting kinds of things. I've noted that the finance director, not just Jody, but all past finance directors, report to the Finance Committee, the Financial Advisory Commission, and now the Audit Committee. And what I find notable is those reports are different depending upon the group. I don't think by intention, I think it's because of the different natures of the group. And I find you really have to go to all three to really get a full understanding of all of the nuances and important things that go on in the financing of the city. So I will endeavor to get those reports to the Finance Committee for the next meeting and continue to give them. The other thing on here is a report from the police and fire pension plan. I will give you, again, a general report, which is that the actuarial assumption that we're operating under for that body is that we need to have an overall yield of 7.5% from our investments in order to meet the cash flows from the pension, going out of the pension plan. That's our actuarial target. In 2019, we had a very good year, and most of our investments well overshot that 7.5% by double digits in some cases. The ones that didn't are our fixed investment items in the portfolio, which is, what would you say, Jody, a quarter of the portfolio?
I couldn't see off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
so it's a quarter of the portfolio. They've never met the 7.5% expectation or need, but they're a hedge for those times when the equity side of the investments take a dive like they did in 2009 and have over time, and so that we at least have some income coming in from those. They're fixed amounts and fixed returns, and they rarely are above 4 or 5%, but they are always positive. Over recent years, because it's been harder and harder to meet our 7.5% yield goal, we have been moving more and more away from fixed investments. And even in the equity side of things, we have been moving more and more into more esoteric kinds of investments, which give higher yields, but also have higher risk. And it's very delicate balance on how we carry that off. We never have people attending those meetings. They are open to the public, and I am impressed by the quality of work done by the pension board. But it is something where we are increasing our risk. And when you do that, sooner or later, at least in some point in time, it will catch up with us. Right now, we are in, relative to the rest of the world, pretty good shape. We're I think it's 84% funded, which I will stack up against most anybody. But we always strive to be 100 or more funded. So far, the rating agencies have looked at us reasonably favored. We don't have AAA, but we're very close to it. And they have some questions that they raise about this from time to time, but not more in terms of information or guidance rather than a negative critique. So I can report to you that we are doing well. We're striving to do better. And with that, and unusually brief for me on both counts,
That's debatable.
believe me, I could be much more exhaustive. I think the last thing
We know.
we have last two things we have is a report from the audit committee, and then an update from the finance director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have the annual report of the audit committee on my desk as we speak. It's not quite finished, ready to be released yet. I hope to have that completed within the next week. We have completed our first, well, at least we have had completed our first audit of department, and that is the Department of Recreation and Parks. I think we're still waiting for
I have the final draft now with the final edits that we asked them to do.
okay.
And I'm getting ready to release that, but I'm trying to formulate a cover letter from me with some management responses to it to say what we can and can't do as a response to those recommendations.
All right. Please keep me copied on that. We are progressing It has been, well, it's been a work in progress. The authority of the audit committee is actually quite limited if you study the wording of the statute that enacted the audit committee 2 years ago. We are working on expanding some of the authority that we have. I choose to read the ordinance rather liberally. We had a city manager who read it absolutely literally, along with one of our members, and I feel like it really using that really handicapped anything that we might do. However, I am looking forward to making progress. We do have requested an RFP for both the transportation, an audit of the transportation department and planning and zoning. I'm not sure what the status of that is at this point. It's been surprisingly difficult to get that out, but be that as it may, therein are our next.
Yeah, they need, I was just going to say that. You're as big a smartass as I am.
Those are the areas that we are looking at. Next, we've had trouble getting people to attend the meeting of late, at least because we have a couple of members who work in Washington and another who is employed full-time here but has been working in another part of the county and has morning meetings with her ordinary employment. But we are making progress, and we hope to continue.
Okay. I have been able to attend all too few of those meetings, but I do appreciate the notion of changing the authorizing legislation. I share your desire for a more liberal approach to that, and I think until we do that, the audit committee is not, as one of the sponsors of the original legislation, the audit committee is not going to fulfill the intended promise. Having said that, I want to interject that there are a couple of things. One is the burden that we put on the finance director to give the same report to different bodies over and over again.
Yeah,
and I know
I agree.
you've discussed that in audit as well. But also, we will need to be looking to the city manager and the city attorney on advice in terms of boundaries and imposition on staff. I mean, what we ask for is unequivocally additional work, and we need to try to figure out how we keep that in a moderate level and a productive level. So thank you for your report. And last but not least, an update from the finance department.
So my department has been busy as ever. As you know, we are down a staff person and 2 others are out still. And so we're trying to fill in as best we can. We are well into budget. We are pulling the first draft of the budget together. So I'm going to start meeting with the department soon to go over their enhancement requests. We've just recently finished the CAFR since our last meeting, the annual financial report that I have distributed to the council, and working on the single audit, which is the audit of the federal expenditures, federal grant expenditures, and that should be done near the end of March.
The CAFR, I'm old school. Is it in hard copy yet?
No, we haven't printed anything yet. I mean, I sent out the PDF.
Right.
You could print that if you want to and clip
Don't want
it.
to.
I am going to print a few bound copies, but I think last year the most we did was 30.
I do consume the CAFR, but I
Okay.
usually do it.
I like a hard copy too.
Yes,
I'm
I know.
old-fashioned.
My
I
fingers
look at that a lot.
Flip. Yeah,
I
okay.
do.
So,
Yeah, we have to send it to a printer and get that drafted up and reviewed, and Get it printed.
Every time I buy print cartridges for my printer at home, it's about a $500 trip. So
Yeah,
to the extent
expensive.
that I can get a hard copy other than out of my pocket, I would appreciate it. I do look at it, and it's not just for the budgeting per se. It really is how it pulls together all the components. The history and the background information that you have in there every year is just so valuable in understanding the city and its finances. So I definitely do value it and can't wait to get my hands on it, literally, as opposed to figurative. So the staff, we got you fully hired, but now we keep having falling back. Are there going to be requests for more staff in the budget?
That I can't tell you yet. Two of the
Why don't
staff.
we ask David to leave the room?
Yeah, what we do in my budget will be part of a conversation that I have with the city manager and the mayor, and whether or not we want to go with extra staff or try to do it through services, some kind of contractual arrangement. So that's not set yet. The staffing issue now is medical. Two of them are out on extended medical, so we're hoping to get them back and active and fill our vacancy and get back up to full staff.
One of the things that seems to suffer, I thought I turned you off, seems to suffer is getting open government fully implemented, which again, I'm looking forward to. Do we have any sense of the timeline on that?
No, we're working through it. We have weekly meetings with the OpenGov staff. We have been working on two elements: the budget builder that builds the book, and that's not going to be available for the proposed budget. We hope to have it done at the adopted budget book. We will be using the workforce planning module in our budget process that allows us to take our personnel information and do projections for next year. That's still got a couple of glitches we're trying to work out in order to use it for this budget. But we have regular meetings. We run into issues, as with any software development. We've had several issues come back at us that we've had to iron out. And the team is me and Katie and Carrie from IT and HR. And so it's not a big implementation team trying to get this ready.
So, just, I don't want to say fair warning because I don't mean this as a threat, but I have been frustrated the last 2 years, and I understand the reasons for it, that we don't have a line item spreadsheet that we can look at and peruse through. That is required in code. I thought open government would be the thing that would give us that ability to look through line by line. I understand that the line item budget is different than the appropriations budget, but it is called for in code, and when you say, tell me what you want to know, and I'll get it for you, I don't know what I want to know until I look at it in some form of line item budget. And so I'm worried that we're going to be in the same position this year. And I think we can't continue to put that off. I mean, it is in the code. We need to have it. If we need to have some appropriation to get it, that's fine. Pardon?
To get what?
To get something akin to the pro forma that we always had, which I agree the pro forma is not the appropriations budget, but it is called for in code, and it is something that we need to look at, we the council writ large, but certainly the finance committee, when we get the budget from the mayor, need to look at so that we understand what's moving from one place to another, like, for example, between the enterprise funds and the general fund, all of those accountings that show administrative fees being charged to the enterprise funds by the general fund, overtime, all of the kinds of details that were in, and doesn't necessarily have to be as elaborate as the 1,000-line long pro forma that
Well,
we used to
that's
get.
what the budget is. If you want a line item of all the funds of all the accounts, you're going to get a 1,000 line item spreadsheet, and I'll be glad
Bring
to
it on
dump.
for me.
All
but-
right,
but-
I will dump all the line items of the budget into a spreadsheet for you.
Well, that would be good, and I think that would be code compliant. I'm certainly open to anything that would make it more efficient or less onerous on your part, but I do look at that, and I do feel the need to look at it, and it gives me comfort in terms of understanding exactly what's going on in the budget. Even the pro forma that we used to get, and I actually had a copy of the Excel spreadsheet, had all kinds of hidden columns and rows and things like that where offline adjustments were made. I'm not asking for that, but I am asking for what would allow us to add up and move across all of the different columns, because I do look at it. And I think there have over time been other people on the finance committee that look at that. So, and then the other thing that was, again, an issue in terms of the appropriation budget, the code calls for a balanced budget. I'm returning to page 18 of the last report. I'm assuming we will show something in the mayor's budget that shows revenues and expenditures equal to each other, even if revenues include transfers?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to bring that up now so it isn't a surprise when we finally do receive the budget, which unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be, isn't that long away. What is the first meeting in April? The council
Yes.
gets the budget?
Yes, we're about 6 weeks out.
Good. All right. Well, I don't mean to add to your burdens, but I do think these are things that we expect to see in some form.
Now, our first, so the detailed spreadsheet will not come to you any earlier than we deliver the
Never
budget
has.
book.
Never
Yeah,
has.
okay. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, no. It's the mayor's budget until the mayor turns it over to us, and that's always been kept. I don't agree with that, but that's always been the prerogative of the mayor, and that follows code, so.
Well, and if we don't like the budget, when he turns it over to us, it's still the mayor's budget.
I don't think we need to be adversarial. We've always had a collegial relationship on the
Yes.
budget, but in any event. All right. Is there anything else for the Finance Committee?
No, Mr. Chair, not for me.
I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I would move that we adjourn.
I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Lyle?
Good job, Mike.